Welcome to the Frail Blaze. This story is called I Ran Into My Old Roommate for the First Time Since Moving Out. While walking down the street, I ran into my old roommate for the first time since moving away. Marie was breathtaking. It's one of the reasons I moved out, because behind that radiant visage lies a viper, curled and ready to strike. When I first moved in, the place was clean and orderly. She had steady work and a few plans. Wrapped up in a few of them was her girlfriend, Monica. I named her Moni because of how loud she was in bed. Moni was not on Marie's level by any stretch of the imagination. I kept it to myself, but I knew this relationship was not going to last. As organized and motivated as Marie was, Moni was the opposite. She left clothing lying around, had odd jobs here and there, but mostly just smoked pot and lounged in her ever-present jogging pants. This really set Marie off. The arguments they had over the future and how life should be were epic. One night, after getting rip-roaring drunk, they came home laughing and carrying on. I could hear their muffled voices coming up from the living room below. Joviality, however, soon became bestial. Their yelling became grunting and guttural, and I snuck a peek. Marie was pinning Monica down face first, using her weight to trap her. She cried while choking her. I told you that Marie was breathtaking, and I meant it. I watched her kill the woman she loved in a drunken fit. She devolved after that. I heard it said that various hunting peoples believed that they inherited the prey's characteristics after the kill. She must have, because she trashed the apartment, quit her job, stayed drunk day in, day out. When she ate food, she'd look through her dirty dishes to find the cleanest ones. When she changed clothes, she'd smell the crotch to find the least offensive. I couldn't stay there any longer. So I found a new roommate, and honestly, I'm much happier now. Claudia is an inspiring artist. I love watching her paint. She's clean, but not too clean. She's single, and she really just lives in the moment. I've truly enjoyed being there. But now, seeing Marie out and about again, I have to admit, she looks great. It makes me wonder how she made it through, or if it's all just pent up inside. I smile a little and make eye contact briefly while we walk past one another. I can still see the viper in her eyes come out. She says not a word, and I quickly look away. Perhaps I'll visit her again soon. But not right now. Right now it's 4:30, and Claudia's showing will be ending in half an hour. That's just enough time to go grocery shopping before she gets home. A little camembert, soft bread, and red wine will make for a nice, quiet night. I'm just able to slip into the attic when I hear Claudia's car pull into the driveway. This story is called Why Did They Have to Choose Our House? We heard the warnings in the news. The anchor delivered the news with piercing eyes and a dramatic voice. He did a great job of expressing the severity of the situation. There was a malfunction in the nearby prison security system, which we know now is largely due to the prison warden's attempt to be more eco-friendly. Batteries die, and solar panels suck in states where there's more cloud than sunlight. We weren't the only ones who chose to stay in our home and wait it out. There were a few families who simply had nowhere to go. Some would rather die than leave their homes. Their names you might have seen briefly in the news. We bought some food in excess and boarded up the windows and doors, the same stuff you see in all the movies. Only, we didn't have any guns. My girlfriend Lucy hated them. She's a firm believer in gun control. The orange jumpsuits had fled into the forest and left in every direction. Being the closest town, it made sense to pack up and leave, but as I said, not everybody thought so. With a total of 17 escapees running in every direction, there would be about 5 hitting the town at most. All of this was theory, of course, but our false confidence established this theory as fact within our minds. Let them come. The police would stop them before they reached us. Yes, with hindsight, we were idiots. I thought up several excuses for what we did, from simply having never experienced a real crime to thinking we never would. At the end of the day, we were still fools for staying. We realized it when we heard voices outside our home that night. Lucy became stiff, as if shocked by a jolt of electricity. At some point, it was like a constant current that was running through her as she started moving around, so fast and shaking like a leaf. I was no better. I couldn't figure out which side of the house the voices were coming from, my first idea being that we leave the house and make a run for the car. Another dumb move we luckily didn't make. Instead, we took advantage of the crawl space beneath our floor. It wasn't a protected basement or a bunker, but it was something. We had the hatch beneath the carpet in our living room. The handle was removed, so I had to use a screwdriver to pry it open. Together, we put our fingers beneath the lip of the lifted lid, and it was a lot heavier than it looked, but the wood floor was old and thick, so it made sense. Lucy crawled under there first, taking a bag of food and a few water bottles with her. I followed after, draping the carpet on top of the hatch and lowering it carefully. I didn't want the carpet to bunch up anywhere. With a thud, the hatch was in place, and I was crawling along the dusty ground to the still form of my Lucy. The front door was bashed in by the time I reached her. She took my hand in hers, and I held it as the door finally gave way. Pathetic nails and a few planks didn't offer much in the way of security. We were terrified. We knew we were in a terrible position, one we didn't know how long we had to be in before help found us, if it ever did. That was the start of our torture. The first footsteps trampled above us. The intruders moved quickly, running further into the house. I heard them enter my office, the guest room, and our bedroom. I heard the doors being slammed, wardrobes pulled open. I'm sure they looked under the beds. The prisoners weren't quiet, but they didn't speak either. It was tough to make out how many there were, maybe 5 or 6. I guess I didn't expect so many to be working together. So maybe it's true that gangs in prison are pretty close-knit. Not something I thought about at that moment. I was just alarmed when they turned the lights on. Light flowed between the gaps in the floorboards. There wasn't a gap wider than my little finger, but it still felt like they were far too large. I saw the way the light curved along Lucy's body, and she looked so weak, so frail. I could see her wide eyes as she looked at me. I saw the fear before she closed them tight, mouthing something quickly to herself, a silent prayer. I reached for her, but stopped when I heard a scream. It came from right above us, making us both jump. Lucy made a small sound, but not loud enough to be heard. The scream carried on for a moment before falling silent. When it did, there was the sound of someone falling. A short burst of thumps as a body hit the ground. We could see where the body fell from the light that it blocked. There was another moment of silence before they started speaking. About time. I was getting sick of him. He was never one of us, the voice said. The voice was slow, steady. I heard the sounds of tearing plastic and the click of a lighter. The man speaking had found my cigarettes and decided to help himself. Do you want to use him for anything? Or can I? The voice right above us said. He must have been the killer. We can use him. Put him over there for now and go get the others, will ya? The smoking one said. You want to do it here? Initiation doesn't have a set time, Samuel. Hurry along. You two, go with them. 3 sets of steps left the house. Silence came quickly. Eventually, all we could hear was the smoking man puffing at a cigarette, slowly and dramatically, as if he were savoring the taste. It was so quiet that we both didn't dare to move, choosing to play dead. I didn't even want to turn my head. Lucy must have felt the same way, as I didn't hear a peep out of her. It was a good hour of waiting, listening to the man go around the house. He spent a lot of time in the kitchen and putting stuff on the counter between it and the living room. Whenever he was far enough away, we took the opportunity to get more comfortable in our positions, mainly ones where we could move without making too much noise. Once more, Lucy's hand found mine, and I held on to it tightly. We heard more voices and laughter. An entire crew of convicts had entered our home. I think I even glimpsed the orange of their clothes, but I could be mistaken. One thing is for sure, they were very happy. Their laughter wasn't any different from friends having a night out, or even teenagers after school ended. It was only when they were walking into my home that they changed their tune. Their laughter died, as did the heaviness of their footsteps. It was almost like they were trying to be polite while intruding, but I soon understood why when the smoking man spoke. Lights, Samuel, if you please, he said, putting on airs of sophistication. Samuel snickered and did as the man asked. The lights were turned off, but the room wasn't completely dark. It took me a moment to realize candles had been lit. Thank you. One went out as I said one was lit. As I realized candles had been lit. Thank you. I think we all find this a lot more appropriate. Another click of the lighter. I really shouldn't smoke during this initiation, but I think you can forgive me. It's been some time since I walked free. Longer than most of you, I should say. There was a collective hum of agreement. I don't imagine it will be long before we're found and taken back. But before that happens, I think we should make this all official. Now is as good a time as any, as I was telling Samuel. Bear in mind, there is no going back. You've all made your decision by entering this house, etc., etc. You can try to run, but Samuel will stop you. Not try to stop you, will stop you. Is that clear? There was a beat, and then the smoking man picked it up. Fantastic. I have to say, it's been a while since I've seen so many ready to take the step. A lot of cowards, weaklings out there, morons who wish to be something other than devout followers, and think that we are the best option after that. There is a God, gentlemen and woman, and that is me. Samuel made a coughing sound as if to clear his throat. Don't you start with me. By the way, which do you think will be the first to find us, him or Mike? Do you really need to ask? Samuel said. I could hear his smile. Best begin now before Michael finds us. So right you are. Now, You do have a choice in your initiation. Each one is presented on the table. I want you all to take your pick now. There was a scramble as the convicts ran to the table. There had to be 20 of them, pushing against each other, climbing over furniture and knocking over objects. It was chaos. I heard things break, curses, spat, and yelps of pain. All that noise was followed by the smoking man and Samuel's laughter. You there, you've got yours. Bring it here, the smoking man ordered. I might need your help, Samuel. There are a lot of them. I will try not to disappoint, Samuel said, this time boasting the words with eagerness. You there, give it to me and close your eyes. I will try to be gentle. You twisted bastard, the smoking man called, as the commotion began. What follows isn't fit to repeat, and thinking about it brings me all kinds of pain. Even if I omit most of it, I can still only describe it as a vision of torment. The scream that jolted us at the start was nothing compared to the screams that followed. There was so much noise that we didn't care if we made any noise ourselves. I wrapped my arms around Lucy, and she did the same for me. I did my best to cover her ears and smother her cries. Among the screams, and in the moment of silence, there was a heavy breathing and the sounds of blood dripping. It was soft at first, barely audible, but all around us puddles began to form. I could feel that sickening warmth hit my leg and soak into my clothes. I can remember the different cries, the stages, the levels of pain. I can remember the words that they said with each sound, the sequences of their suffering. Detachment saved my mind from additional damage, but by then they were nearly done. There were a few more cries that followed, but they ended with disturbing sounds inflicted by whatever weapons Samuel and the smoking man had. Not a bad night, the one with the cigarette said. Don't know if he will be happy with it, but I sure am. What do you think? They will do. You just enjoy the initiations, don't you? I don't have the mind for bigger things, Samuel answered. I am merely a tool. I have so little respect for you that I almost hate you. You know that? I don't care. He is almost here. He must have heard us. The smoking man sighed. Well, do you think this is the time to deal with those two hiding under the floor? The smoking man asked. Well, there's only one way to find out. The two ran towards the part of the room where the hatch was located. We were frozen in fear, thinking that the worst was about to happen. Then there was light. It was blinding and pure. I could see all the dust and cobwebs in the crawl space. I saw the bright portal open as the hatch was lifted. I heard voices but couldn't make out any of the words. I saw a bloodied hand curl around the edge and hold on to it until finally it gave in and it was dragged away by something else. The light faded and darkness returned. Lucy and I were found by the police much later. We were asleep when they did, still holding on to each other. We wouldn't wake up, no matter how much they prodded us and yelled. Eventually, they thought something was wrong, and with the help of paramedics, they managed to get us out of the crawl space. We finally woke up in the back of an ambulance before it had ever left, oxygen masks attached to our faces. After removing them, they gave us a once-over and concluded that we were in good health. The police started to talk with us next, and we told them as much as we could possibly remember. It seemed our information wasn't that useful, though, as there wasn't an escaped prisoner that was named Samuel, and neither of us had truly confirmed that we'd seen any of the escaped prisoners. It was still pinned on the prisoners escaping and becoming unaccounted for, but our story had more holes than Swiss cheese. The cherry on top of our ludicrous experience was the state of our home. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing was broken, no bodies, and no blood. Not even the blood I felt hit my pants. They were perfectly clean. While driving through the town, the police saw the door was open, decided to investigate, and they found an empty house with a hatch hang open in the living room. That's how they managed to find us. And yes, people closer to us have questioned our sanity. Not just the cops who needed concrete proof before believing anything. Lucy and I still get angry about it to this day, having those who love us occasionally look at us as if we were absolutely crazy. We talk about it sometimes. We write down what we experienced and read it over and over again. But it only raises more questions than it answers. What was this initiation all about? How did they know we were hiding? What happened afterwards? And just, why did they have to choose our house? You again. I suppose you want another story. This one's called Everything is Fine. I wake up. I eat breakfast while watching the news. It's always the same story. A serial hit and runner. 3 more dead. Everything is fine. I drive to work, lighting a cigarette before my shift starts. My wife always tells me my habits will start hurting me eventually. But what does she know? I am fine. Everything is fine. My boss calls me into his office. He tells me he has to let me go. He's sorry, but they can't have someone like me working there. Everything will be fine. I start driving home. I see a woman leaving the park with a small boy. No one else is around. Perfect. I leave them to bleed out on the road. I drive home. I am happy. I see a note on the table, my wife's handwriting. Took our son to the park. We'll be back around 8. I look at the clock. 7:57. 8 o'clock. 8:45. 10 o'clock. Is everything fine? I go to bed. I wake up. I eat breakfast while watching the news. It's always the same story. Nothing is fine. It's called Play Stupid Games. Win stupid prizes. Step right up and put your hand on the Toyota. The last person to remove their hand gets the car. Wally, the energetic owner of Wally's Car Emporium, beckons me and 6 other contestants towards the expensive vehicle in the middle of the junkyard. Readying himself, I step forward and confidently place my hand on the silver Toyota Corolla's door. Around me, the rest of the participants circle the car and do the same. I size each one up, weighing my odds of winning. The guy opposite me is quite overweight, so he'll give up quickly. and the woman beside me is middle-aged, so she'll probably tap out sooner than most. When I received a flyer in my mailbox for a competition to win a brand new car, I just knew that I had to enter. Not so I could drive a Toyota, but so I could repay my debts. The first thing I'll do if I win is sell this car. Take the $30,000 and settle what I owe. An hour passes, and then another hour. As morning turns into afternoon, I see fatigue creeping into my fellow contestants, some of them slumping down and others awkwardly stretching, but none budge in their grip on the car. They really want to win too. Soon enough, it's evening and the contest is still going. Not one single person has taken their hand off yet, even accidentally. Impatient, I scan the others for any weak links. I notice a skinny guy who's drunk over a liter of water by now squirming to go to the washroom. Bingo, here's the first disqualification. Forget it. I quit. I really gotta piss. The man relents, turning away from the car. Except to his and our surprise, his hand remains firmly on the surface. But what the hell? I can't get my hand off. He starts screaming. Confusion spreads among me and my competitors. This has to be him tricking us into removing our hands, surely. But I immediately realize I can't pry even a finger off of the metal door. Our hands are stuck to the vehicle like flies to flypaper. Congratulations, applauds Wally, emerging from the darkened junkyard. Quite a strong glue I put on there, isn't it? Suddenly, a scrap magnet comes to life and attaches itself to the car from above and begins hoisting it and all 7 of us into the air. There never was a contest, I'm afraid, Wally continues. Each of you borrowed money from a loan shark, my pal. And what better way to eliminate his most overdue debtors than to send a message to all the rest? Hanging off the car by my left hand, flailing with my right, I look down and see the junkyard's car crusher below us as we plunge down into the powerful compactor. I realize Wally was right. We did get the car. We got it mashed right into our flesh. I'm a pretty brave guy, I think. I'm fine with heights, bugs, gore, scary movies, all of those things. I'm also a fairly big guy. I stand at 6'5" and I spend a lot of time in the gym, so you can understand why it takes a lot to scare me. That must be why my friends find my fear of the ocean so amusing. I honestly can't stand it, but I think it's completely rational. I mean, there are so many things in the ocean out to get you. Just thinking about deep water gives me a sense of dread. But it's summer. Everyone is at the beach, my friends included. Last week they told me that all of them were going to the beach on the weekend, and that I just had to come. You know how I feel about it, I said to them. Can't you swim? They asked. Sure I can, in a pool. I'm telling you, any sane person shouldn't want to swim in the ocean. Get over yourself, Ted. You're a 25-year-old man. Not one to be emasculated so easily, I decided that I'd tough it out. helped by Tracy's suggestion that if I wanted to, I could just mope in the sand and get myself a tan. So Saturday morning we went to the nearest beach. I spent the first 5 minutes laying down on the sand with Tracy, Caroline, and Ruth. But it was scorching. So I gave in, and I walked towards the water, much to Evan, Tyson, and Hank's delight. They were up to their waists in water, half attempting to drown each other and laughing all the while. I was only up to my knees, but once they began to goad me, I took a step forward and immediately felt a prickling sensation on my leg. Evan moved towards me, probably planning on dragging me in deeper, but I yelled at him to keep his distance. "This weird-looking jellyfish just stung me," I yelled. "Oh, I see it," he responded. The bell, or hood, which is to say the head of the jellyfish, was transparent, and it looked like there was this pink, wrinkly mass inside with a ton of tentacles dangling from it, several of them touching my leg. Safe to say, I hopped back to the safety of the sand quickly. Tracy was apologizing profusely for pressuring me into swimming, which I just laughed at. "That's a nasty-looking sting you've got there, Ted," Evan interjected. He was right. A solid part of my leg surrounding the sting had gone extremely pale. "You want me to pee on it?" Tyson joked, now having walked over. "I'll pass. I'm not getting back in the water, though," I responded. "Okay, Ted, I'm not going to argue with you there." We stayed there for about another 2 hours, by which point I'd actually fallen asleep. I was woken up by Evan and the girls standing over me looking concerned. There was the sound in the distance of Tyson laughing maniacally, probably holding Hank underwater or something like that. "What's wrong?" I muttered, sitting up. "You're white as a ghost," Caroline pointed out. "Bit odd, in this heat," Ruth agreed. They were right. I told them I'd head home, to which they insisted that I visit a doctor. As I drove home, though, I figured that the pink ones aren't meant to be dangerous. Besides, I was half asleep already. I got home and fell asleep as soon as I touched the bed. When I woke up, it was dark, and I had this intense need for water. I was still extremely tired, though, so I half crawled to my fridge and downed more than 5 bottles of water right there. I felt a bit better, so I stood up and caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I was much skinnier and hairless, but that wasn't very important. My skin was clear, fully transparent. My body didn't look right either. Instead of blood or muscle, I just saw my skeleton. My nervous system and my organs floating around in an elastic, jelly-like substance. Understandably, I passed out. When I awoke, the sun was setting. I stumbled over to a mirror. I was hoping to find out that it was just some sort of strange nightmare. Instead, things had gotten much worse. My organs, which I could unfortunately see clearly, were smaller and withered. My bones also looked to be in the process of dissolving. I passed out again. However, when I woke this morning, it had been nearly a week since I had been stung. This time, though, I was comparatively full of energy. I walked over to the mirror once again. I looked like a humanoid mass of jelly. The only things inside me were my brain and my eyes, now surrounded by a jellyfish hood, and my nervous system in the final process of arranging itself into tentacles. Worse than that, though, I had this irresistible urge to return to the ocean. I managed to drive myself to the beach and found myself looking at around a dozen other people in the same state that I was in. It makes sense. The beach was crowded when I visited last. As I watch everyone walk in, as soon as they set foot into the water, they collapse forwards, dissolving, leaving only the head and tentacles. It's kind of an effort to type with jelly fingers and all, but it's even tougher resisting the urge to just enter the sea. But that's when my eyeballs will disappear, and I'll be left as nothing more than a jellyfish. There are only two things that I hope for now. One, please God, I hope I'm not conscious as a jellyfish. Two, I do hope that the beach is not crowded this weekend. I'm not confident in either. So, my final advice: stay away from the beach this summer. This one is called, I found a cute gnome buried in my garden, but it's freaking me out. Day 1. I've never been one to believe in the supernatural or even indulge in horror stories, but what I'm experiencing is making me question everything. It started with a garden gnome that I found buried in the backyard of my new house when I moved into it. It's just a regular ceramic gnome, or so I thought. I placed it near the roses, thinking it'd add a quirky touch to the garden. Day 3. Something weird is happening. I could swear the gnome wasn't in the same position as where I left it. I thought maybe an animal moved it, but how could any animal move something so heavy? It's probably just me being forgetful. Day 7. I'm not being forgetful. The gnome is moving, I'm sure of it now. Every morning when I wake up, it's in a different spot. It's always a subtle change, but it's enough to notice. I tried to brush it off, telling myself there's a logical explanation. Maybe someone is trying to play a prank on me, perhaps? Day 10. No one's playing a prank. They're to the point. I decided to test my theory and marked the gnome's position with a piece of chalk. The next morning, it had moved, well beyond the chalk line. I'm starting to feel uneasy. The look on the gnome's face also seems different somehow, almost menacing. Day 14. I can't sleep. Every little sound at night makes me jump. I feel like the gnome is watching me, even though I know that sounds crazy. It's just a ceramic figure, right? But why does it feel like its eyes are always following me around? Day 17. I tried to get rid of it. I threw it in the trash, but the next morning there it was back in the garden, covered in dirt as if it had dug itself out somehow. I'm genuinely scared now. This can't be normal. I don't know what to do. It's just a gnome, but why do I feel like it's something much more sinister? This is the part where people always ignore that feeling, although they might be a week late on this one. Day 20. Things are getting worse. Last night I heard noises outside my window, like the scraping of ceramic on concrete. I was too frightened to look. When I mustered the courage to check in the morning, the gnome was right there, outside of my bedroom window, staring in. That would be a sight. Day 23. I can't keep this to myself anymore. I tried to tell a friend about what's happening, but they laughed it off. They don't understand. I feel like I'm trapped in some sort of nightmare. The gnome is not just some type of garden decoration. There's something evil about it. I don't know how I know. I can just feel it. Day 25. Last night was the worst. I heard the scraping again, but this time it was louder, closer. I dared to peek through the blinds, and I wish that I hadn't. The gnome was there, but it wasn't still. I saw it move. Its tiny ceramic feet shuffling towards my door. I locked everything and pushed a dresser against my bedroom door. Day 27. Well, they've made it 2 more days. I'm writing this because I don't know what will happen to me. The gnome is outside my door. I can hear it scraping against the wood. I don't understand how this is possible. It's just a garden gnome, but it's terrorizing me. I'm so scared. I don't know what it wants, but I can feel its malice. If you're reading this, please believe me. I do. It's not just a story. Something is very wrong with that gnome. I don't know if I'll make it through the night. But I had to warn others. Be careful of the things you find in your garden. They might not be as innocent as they seem. Welcome. I am the Frail Blaze. Today's story: if you ever hear a cry for help at night while camping, ignore it. I loved camp, but after my most recent trip, I don't think it will ever be the same. I set up my tent on nice, flat ground and collected some wood for fire. The night came with all its nightly sounds, and I relaxed at the hooting owls and chirping crickets. Even better was the fact that no one else was around. Help. It was subtle. I almost missed it. The voice came from deep within the woods, and for a moment I didn't believe what I was hearing. It sounded female, but oddly enough, I just couldn't tell. Please, help, it continued. I shined my flashlight between the bushes and walked around. To be completely honest, even as a grown man, I was paralyzed with fear, so I did the responsible thing and called the local police. That's when things went from odd to very, very weird. The police told me to ignore it. I explained to them that someone could be injured, probably needed medical attention, but they assured me otherwise. When I kept pushing and asked why, they told me, "Sir, if you ever hear that voice again, ignore it. Do not respond and do not approach." Well, I did hear it again, but I didn't ignore it. It was almost midnight when I heard the voice a second time. I awoke to someone whispering, "Help." And it sounded like she was just outside my tent. I went out to check and no one was there, but the voice continued from a distance. "Help, please." Again, I grabbed my flashlight and looked around the area where I was camping. I was too afraid to follow the voice into the woods, especially since the authorities themselves avoided it. but I struggled morally, trying to decide whether I should go and help this person or listen to the police, who were concerned for my safety. But then I heard another different voice. This other voice, which also seemed to be coming from the woods, was an octave lower. Unlike the first one, which cried for help, this one was loud and demanding. "Quiet," the other voice demanded. "No one's going to help you." Once I heard that, I was sure someone was in trouble. I called the police again. When I informed them about the second voice coming from the woods, they seemed even more concerned. They told me that I should pack my things and leave the campsite immediately. Then, they said that hearing the second, more manly voice meant that it was getting desperate. They also said that the two voices were coming from the same person. That part was bizarre and confused me, to say the least. It was at this point that I dismissed the police in the area as crazy, but not before telling them off. I got angry. I told them that if they didn't get down here to come check it out, then I would do it myself. I said repetitively that a woman could be in serious trouble, and that it is their duty to help her. But still, they refused to come. All they kept repeating to me over and over was, "Do not enter the woods, sir." They seemed more afraid than I was. Once I hung up the phone, I heard the voices again. A gentle, "Please, somebody help me." And then a growling, "Quiet, no one's coming." It was a little bit past midnight at that point. I couldn't live with myself knowing that I had the chance to save someone's life, but instead cowered. So I grabbed some things and ventured into the woods. When I entered the woods, the voices ceased just like that. No cries, no whispers, and no commands. Even the owls and crickets went away. Nothing but dancing leaves and creaking tree branches. I stopped walking and looked around, a full 360 degrees. "Hello? Anyone there?" I called out, but there was nothing. "I'm here to help," I continued. "Where are you? Are you okay?" Still, nothing. I thought of calling the police again, and then I chuckled to myself. I found it strange, but somewhat comforting that I didn't find anyone out there. Nonetheless, I was still creeped out. So I packed my things and finally left the campsite. I don't know why the police, of all people, were so afraid. Worst case, someone was in actual danger and we've all failed them. Best case, there are some morons who think saying "help me" in the middle of nowhere is a great idea of a prank. To be honest, when I heard the voice the very first time, I did think it was a joke. When I heard it the second time, along with that other voice, I became a bit more concerned. And same with the third time I heard it in the woods. But when I heard it again, a fourth time, a week after I left my campsite, coming from inside my own house, that time I became very, very concerned. I guess I'm blinded with a bag strapped to a chair, butt naked with the world spinning in my eyes. Although I'm too out of it to know that there even is a world, or eyes. I can't seem to gather myself to... I can't remember how or when I was drugged. "How are we today?" A sickeningly sweet tone woke me up. He was imitating my voice, and I recognized his. I remember him. He used to be my patient, one of the crazy ones. But I never imagined he'd be a danger to anyone but himself. Hello, Patrick. What are we doing here? Justice stuff, he replied. You ruined my life, you know. Are you aware of that? I'm sad to hear you see it that way. But this isn't justice, Patrick. We can't kidnap people. Don't you understand? That's insane. This, Doctor, this is sanity. See? I stopped taking those pills you gave me. We shouldn't do that now, should we? Oh, please. Cut it with the we bullshit and talk like an actual human being, Patrick snapped. You changed my pills. Admit it. Patrick, when a person's mind... Shut the fuck up. I was perfectly sane. I had ADHD and a good medication for that. But when I got you as my doctor and you started giving me the pills, everything went to shit. Sometimes coincidences can... I had a tox screen, Patrick said. Yeah, paid myself sick for that one. Oh, I see. I shifted my weight from one side to the other, and Patrick knew how to read my silence. Do you know what it felt like? He sniffled. That shit you gave me made me feel like tiny balls of glue were on my skin, stuck to my arm hairs, fingers, eyebrows, like I'd been wrapped up in old masking tape and covered in its residue. I'd keep pinching it with my fingernails and plucking it out. But there was always more, everywhere. Pinch, pluck, pinch, pluck, pinch, pluck, everywhere. The side effect you suffered was an extremely rare one. You cannot possibly blame me for... What did you do with my real meds? I hesitated and answered quietly. I sold them. That stuff really sells, and I honestly thought you'd be fine with another medication, that you wouldn't even notice the switch. But listen, we can split the... Actually, you can keep all the money. That's just fair. I don't want your filthy money. Then why are we here? Patrick suddenly pulled the bag off my head. My eyes hurt from the sudden burst of fluorescent light. I saw his figure looming over me. Dear God, he was reddish-brown and crusty all over, his bare muscles twitching where his skin used to be, before he'd ripped it off, pinch by pinch. His eyeballs staring at me with burning fury, perfectly round now that he didn't have eyelids anymore. I told you, justice stuff, he replied, as his bare, and I mean bare, hand reached towards my face for a pinch. Welcome. I am the Frail Blaze. Today's story: take a different route. Walking the same familiar route can feel comforting, since you know exactly where you are going. But what happens when someone else knows that same route? I sadly have had this experience, and I'll tell you, it's good to mix up your schedule. As a child, I always took the same route from my bus stop to my house. I did this because it was routine and it felt familiar. I continued this pattern of having one specific route all the way to college. Only then did I even consider taking a new way. My freshman year of college, I took one walking path to all my classes. I'd leave my room at 8, walk 10 minutes to Spanish and arrive by 8:10. Leave Spanish and arrive at English by 9:20. Leave English and arrive at Gender and Women's Studies at 10:40. And finally, leave Gender and Women's Studies at 11:40 and arrive back home by 12. I even allowed time to get lunch or hang with friends after class. On Wednesday nights, I'd walk on the outskirts of campus with my friends. There we talked and enjoyed each other's company. On Thursday nights, I went to choir and usually took the long, more quiet way back home. This all changed when I began to notice him. I didn't know who he was, but I did know that I'd seen him on more than one occasion, usually when I was alone and rarely when I was with others. He was a shadow at first. I thought he was a student, but I soon realized there wasn't a student on campus that looked like him. He seemed to know where I was at all times. Late at night, I'd notice him following me. One night, I was headed home from choir when I had a gut feeling. I'd never known this feeling before. It was like a deep feeling of dread. And there was this little voice in the back of my head telling me, "Do not go this way." I cautiously looked around, and there he was. The man, my shadow, my follower, sitting on a bench which I passed after choir regularly. He didn't look at me, but he was different. His demeanor was off. Whenever he followed me before, I felt no fear, but I did feel observed. This time, I felt a deep, unnerving fear when I saw him. It made my stomach fill with dread, and my heart beat fast. Luckily, he was turned away from me, and he hadn't seen me yet. Before he noticed, I turned on my heel and quickly walked into the cafe hall. I stayed there for a bit, hoping he'd left by now so I could head home without him seeing me. It was about 10 p.m. this time, and the hall was closing, so I had no choice but to walk home alone at night. As I stepped outside, I still felt uneasy and very, very jumpy. At first, the walk home was fine, as I kept checking behind me, scared that he'd be there. Suddenly the gut feeling was back and worse than before. I turned and looked around frantically, searching for him, and then I saw him, waiting in the thick, overgrown, cultivated area. It was dense, but I saw him waiting there, his body barely showing as he crouched down. I was only 5 minutes away from home, and I had two choices. I either stayed on this route and would run home, or I could take a different route which would add another 10 minutes. I sighed and decided I would take this route, but I would run. I knelt down and set my bag next to me, making it look as if I was tying my shoe, when in reality I was grabbing my keys out of my bag. The minute I stood up, I felt the dread subside as it was replaced by pure fucking adrenaline. I took a deep breath and took off running. I ran past the cultivated area and heard the rustling of leaves and the breaking of branches as he pursued. I heard him behind me, following me as I ran, but I didn't look back. I kept running. I ran until my lungs hurt, and I found myself in front of my dorm doors. I unlocked and wrenched them open. My friends looked at me, confused, as I raised a finger to my lips and ducked down out of sight. After 10 minutes, I peeked out of the window and saw no sight of him. I asked my friends if they'd seen someone, a man, looking for me. They told me they had. He had come into view seconds after I ran inside. He was breathing heavily and, most concerning, he had a knife. They watched as he looked around, searching for something, searching for me. They told me he'd done this for 5 minutes before walking out of sight. That night, I told them everything. They believed me, and for the next week took to escorting me around campus. They took turns walking me to class, to and from my choir practice. My friend even accompanied me as I talked to the school and gave them a description of the man who followed me. The school assured me that I was safe, that they would take care of me. Luckily, my schedule changed a week later, and I found myself exploring different routes. I still checked behind me to see if he was there, but luckily, he never was. A week later, my friend pulled me aside and showed me a news article. It described the man had been caught robbing and murdering a young woman just a mile or so from school. They also described how he stalked his victim and knew her schedule before robbing and murdering her. My blood ran cold as I saw the perpetrator's picture. It was him, the man who followed me. I shuddered to think that had I taken my usual route that night, I would not be here today. As I now knew that if I had, I would have been his victim that night. You can see all kinds of people on public transportation. But what if the person you're looking at is looking back at you? It doesn't seem to be a person at all. Welcome to the Frail Blaze. This time, maggots. The story is called My Brother Went Missing. Something Found Me. Back in 1992, my brother, Boone, went missing. Our family had always lived in North Dakota, but Boone had always dreamed of leaving. In 1990, Boone was accepted to the University of Miami in South Florida. His freshman year, he met a couple of good friends, and they all moved into a little beach bungalow their first summer. He had been living there ever since. In late August of 1992, Boone called home, and I answered. It was around 1 a.m., and he sounded frantic. He said the hurricane that was about to hit was going to be bad, and that he was leaving to come home. He said something was wrong, and that he could feel it building around him in the air. I told him the plan. I told him to meet me at the first Greyhound bus station past the Florida-Georgia border, and we could drive back home together. I wanted to make sure he was safe because he was really scaring me. Boone said he would call home again as soon as he got to the bus station. I told him I would already be en route. Just let Mom know he was safe and waiting for me. I packed a small bag of cash, left my mom a note, and biked to the bus station. I was really freaked out. Though my brother was a dreamer and a creative, he wasn't one to panic or really fright easily. I got on the bus and took note of the only other people there immediately. Only 4 others, 2 pairs of male and female companions. The closer pair was to the right, in the first row behind the driver. The woman looked frightened. The man looked as if he was trying to keep his demeanor calm. The other couple was even more strange. They sat towards the back on the left side. The man was sleeping against the window, but the woman had giant dark eyes. They were glassy and shiny. She looked as if she had just been interrupted from crying over a funeral wake. Her mouth was open, though, slack-jawed, and I could see too many teeth. She would not take her eyes off of me. I could almost feel them poking the back of my head as I sat down 2 rows behind the first couple. The bus took off, and I tried to think of anything but my brother and the strange lady staring at me. I pulled out a book and started to read. I didn't hear the first plinking sounds until we were in South Dakota a few hours later. It was faint over the background noise, but it was distinct on the plastic floor. Plink, plink, plink. As day broke and we took our first stop, I decided to get off to buy a couple snacks and relieve myself in the bathroom. I didn't turn around when I stood up, I just exited. When I returned to the bus, I took a deep breath and stepped on, hoping the woman had fallen asleep, or better yet, gotten off. No. Instead, her companion seemed to have disappeared, as well as the other couple. It seemed as though the woman hadn't even moved, but she just stared at me. I took my spot where the other couple had been sitting and tried to forget she was still on the bus. Plink, 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 plink. The noise, it seemed to go on for hours, like an irregular, leaky faucet, dripping pebbles onto linoleum. When we reached Tennessee, she got off the bus, but as she passed me, she touched my shoulder and said, "Not yet." I couldn't bring myself to even glance at her. I was trying not to shake out of my skin. Her voice was so hollow and raspy, like it belonged to a broken drive-through speaker. She smiled and exited. I thought she might break her neck to continue staring at me as she left. As soon as the bus lurched forward, I got up and went to where the woman had been sitting, staring. I looked down and saw a pile of human and animal teeth. The man who I had thought left the bus previously was slumped in his seat, almost falling forward to the floor. When we got to the next station, the bus driver called the police, and I was transferred to a new bus. The whole situation was really unsettling to me. Understandable. When I got to the final Greyhound station in Georgia, I looked around for my brother. His car wasn't there, and I didn't see him anywhere. I called home at the payphone, and Mom answered. I asked if Boone had called. She said that he hadn't. So I waited. I waited a full day at the station. He never showed. I called home again, and Mom still hadn't gotten a phone call either. I called Boone's house. The line just rang and rang and rang. I broke down crying on the bench. I got back home, and Mom told me some of the news that she had seen. Hurricane Andrew had swept through South Florida and ravaged the state. There were deaths and many reported missing. My mom called the school when it reopened for classes to see if Boone had shown up, to which they told us No. We called the police and filed a missing persons report. My mom and I went down to Florida together the next week to help in searching for Boone and the others, including his roommates. We never found anyone or Boone. We still don't know what happened to him that day. His car was never seen, and because his roommates were missing too, we could never figure out where he last was. In fact, most of their home had been destroyed, and most of Boone's personal items were either swept away or he'd taken them with him. Since then, I have suffered with debilitating nightmares that make sleep basically impossible. I have flashbacks to seeing that woman on the bus, the dead man, Boone, the destruction of the hurricane. It just comes back and hits me whenever I'm awake. I spent the first year after Boone went missing in bed, hardly eating, catatonic. But as time marched on, the images and nightmares slowly, and I mean slowly, started to fade, and I could begin to recall the better times that I had shared with Boone. Today, I visited the headstone my mom had made last year in honor of Boone. It was early evening. I remember as I walked to his headstone, I could see a stack of something that wasn't there before. As I got near, I pushed aside the flowers and noticed it was a pile of teeth. When I examined further, I noticed animal teeth as well. I stood up, and the woman from the bus, more than 30 years ago, was standing in front of me. She was exactly as I remember from all of my nightmares. All she said was, "Soon." What do you think she was? Apparently unaging. Has something to do with teeth. Interesting tale. Tragedy surrounding another tragedy. But let me know what you thought in the comments below. And subscribe already. But I thank you for joining me for that interesting tale. I wonder what she was. And I do hope that you'll join me in the future for more Frail Blaze tales.